Is it immoral to read? Sometimes. I would say sometimes. I don't think we ever consider or think of reading as a bad practice. It's always something that's going to enrich you and make you into a better, more intelligent person. Or it's a hobby and something that passes the time and relaxes you, and therefore is still a good thing because it helps you look after yourself. However, in this modern day and age, how does the literal act and process of reading, how does that interact with commodification and capitalization, and how do we understand the boundaries between moral and immoral reading, and what do those practices actually mean? What does it mean to be immoral and moral when reading? And is reading a confined vacuum process, or is it interrelationary? And of course it is. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about morals and dynamics of reading, and perhaps more pressingly, should we read more or less? Is it better to read more books or to read less books? Most people would say it's better to read more because you get to look at different opinions, you learn more things. Reading more, doing more of something makes you better at it, makes you understand more, makes you a more well-rounded person. Is there instances where it is better to read less? Maybe. So I think what we find increasingly in the 21st century and in the 20th century as well is this idea of performatism. It's a very big thing, especially within like the past year, like performative matcha drinking, Labubu, Clairo listening males. A lot of things feel performative and fake and just insincere. And the act of reading can feel like a performance, i.e. grabbing a certain book because we know that it connotes certain values and that reading this signifies to other people that maybe you want to assimilate yourself into a certain group or seem like you have these morals and values as someone else who would read that book, stereotyping who would read that book, which kind of feeds into commodification of books as signifiers rather than appreciating what is actually within them. We are actually judging books more and more by their covers, I feel. And of course, what this begs the question of is, if we've stopped reading for ourselves, do we read because we want to read that book, or are we reading because that book is within a certain canon, or it fits within our certain stereotype and typification of our own being, and wanting to assimilate into a group and create a sense of community to such a deep extent that we read more, we read a wide range of books, but they fit into a certain canon. So if you think or you feel that you like romance books, you pick whether you want to go down the dark fantasy route or the classical route, etc. And then you read books that are within that sphere, and you don't read different books, you read more of the same book. You could say it's the same with me. I enjoy classics. That's kind of my thing. I enjoy 19th century Victorian novels. You could say that because I keep reading more and more of them, and perhaps not a wide range of books, even though I feel I'm tapping into a few. I've not read, as much Renaissance literature as I have Victorian, so therefore, even though I'm reading more, I'm not necessarily enriching myself to the extent that I could because I'm reading the same things. You can only read so much Dickens before you feel that you know everything about Dickens, and you keep reading and reading the same thing. Would it be better if I read less of that and read more of other things? Probably, but then what is the purpose of that? And does everything have to be a moral judgment, and does everything have to be productive? Because I also think we align commodification and reading and digestion with productivity, and doing more of something and having an excess of it with productivity. So for example, if I earn a lot of money, I have an excess amount of money, I can buy an excess amount of product. For some reason that connotes that I'm productive and that I'm like a good person. So like having more of something, having more books makes me like a more productive, better reader. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if we should synonymize more with productivity. That doesn't make sense to me, because I can read a book and it not make sense, but in the productive, more reading is better sphere, I've finished that one, let's move on to the next one. If you ask me, for example, what I read in the book A, I don't know, because I've already moved on to book B and I'm halfway through book B, and because I want to keep feeding into the community that I have chosen and to assimilate myself into some sort of faux pseudo readership, scholarship idea, then I move on to the next book without actually digesting and understanding what I have just read. which I think is more important. So maybe rather than reading less, I think we should read more intentionally and with more vigour, with more interest, and with more zeal. It's not about saying, oh, I've read 100 books this year, I've read more than you. It's about appreciating and understanding literature because it is a work of art. It's like going around a museum and just sort of running around it and then not digesting any of the art that you've just seen because you just want to say that you've done it rather than appreciate the moment you're waiting for that end product of performatism. Now, of course, you can speak about the flip side of this. If you read less but you do close reading, oftentimes I think that feels and seems like something pretentious or something too scholarly for the day-to-day reader. No day-to-day reader is reading a page and then reading it 3 more times and then unpicking every single word and looking at the specific syntax and looking for deixis or oxymorons or whatever. If you're reading a poem, yeah, they might notice the end rhymes, they might not know what meter it's in. That doesn't make them a bad reader, it just makes them a different reader. So I think you can have sort of polar opposites on this conversation. There needs to be sort of an in-between, but then also in that same breath, can you read less and better but also read widely at the same time and let that be coherent and cohesive and make sense to you, because ultimately that feels like it would just slow you down rather than help you appreciate what you're reading. So in this sort of close reading mindset, I think it's better to read less and understand what you have read and appreciate it and maybe reread it, have favourite bits, pick bits out, think about specific sentences, specific clauses, phrases that really sort of speak to you, and understand the book as a piece of artwork rather than something that you're only 60% of the way done with, or oh, I only have 20 pages of it left, waiting for the end, desiring and wanting the end. And that can feel pretentious and sort of nitpicky and sort of like the when you're at secondary school and it's like, oh, the author doesn't care that the curtains are blue, my teacher just wants me to talk about how they're blue to speak about metaphors and feelings. But you can find your own sweet middle ground within that, I think. And knowing a text intensely and well just feels more productive to me than reading 10 books and skimming through them. What do I gain from skimming rather than properly reading? I think the caveat to that is that reading intensely, yes, is great, but also if I've only read a few books, so let's say I've read 20% of the books that someone else has read, trying to have a conversation with them about the books that I've been reading, I don't have as many books to compare what I've read with and to put them in conversation with and to understand them more widely and deeper because I've only read a select few books. So there is a caveat to the whole close reading thing, is that we only have a certain amount of time on earth and a certain amount of time to read, that you can't read 5 books and then think that you understand everything about literature and about the topics they discuss, because you don't have other things to put in the conversation with. You don't have books that disagree with them, books that offer a different perspective, books that are written 200 years later than the book that you've read, and how that looks differently, or maybe it even looks the same, which is oftentimes more interesting. So you need these canons almost to help understand the worlds that you are reading, but then reading the canons and the stereotypical set of books for like your character then also feels wrong, because you're feeding into the idea that you have been pigeonholed, and then you read more but you don't actually end up reading more, you just end up reading more about certain topics that yes, you're interested in, but it also shelters you from other topics. But then reading one book about say 50 topics, reading one book for each topic would be meaningless because you wouldn't learn anything, you wouldn't know anything apart from very basic surface level knowledge that you probably knew before you read the book anyway. So then you need to read another book, and then you end up reading more and more and more and more and more, and then you're consuming and consuming and consuming, and then it's just kind of this really weird dynamic that I think we should think about more. And also going back to my first point about commodification and capitalisation that maybe I didn't touch on as well as I could have, is that when we're reading, you go to a shop and you buy a £10 book, and then you buy another one, another one, and another one. We don't treat these books how they should be treated, I think. So let me get an example. Okay, perfect. I have Chaucer, The Canterbury Tales, the Penguin Classic version that has been translated into modern English. So it's super easy to understand and read. It's obviously Geoffrey Chaucer, very important literary figure, but it's in modern English. Nice, lovely paperback. I don't know if you can tell, I've never opened this book. This spine has not been touched, it has not been cracked. I've actually never flicked through this apart from literally just now. I bought this maybe 3 years ago, never ever been touched. However, the copy that is currently downstairs in my uni pile is another copy of Geoffrey Chaucer, The Canterbury Tales. It's the big Riverside Chaucer edition that I got off of eBay for £3. The spine is already bent and cracked, all of the pages are yellow, some of them have annotations in from other readers, and I have already read that. And yeah, I haven't read this one that I spent £10 on in Waterstones, that is perfectly fine and should have been used and read. That feels immoral, to consume and consume and consume more books, but not use them as they should be used. This should be destroyed. I really enjoyed The Canterbury Tales. Therefore, if I have a copy of it, it should be worn and loved and used and destroyed, and yet it's not. It sits there on my shelf, and it signifies to people when they walk in that I know who Geoffrey Chaucer is, and that I appreciate his work, and that we could have a conversation about him maybe. But it doesn't show that I love him and that I appreciate him. And then we have other instances, for example, Dracula here. I have 2 copies. That's my favourite book of all time. This specific one, from my friend, is annotated by her. She's gone through all the pages, annotated it, told me bits that she thinks that I might like, bits that she didn't like, thoughts that she had, little jokes in it, inside jokes. The spine is cracked. I read it every single year at Halloween. This is a loved book. This is how books should be treated. I have read this same book 5-6 times. I've read it more and more and more, but I've read the same thing more and more and more. Instead of reading 6 books at surface level, I've read this one intensely, and every single time I read it, I love it more and more and more and more. That feels more moral to my own character, to nurture and foster my interests in literature, than to read things for the sake of reading them and because I think that students should read them. Obviously, I don't want to hinder myself. Like, if a book comes out and I think that sounds amazing, I want to read it, of course I'm going to buy it and read it. But I find it more important to build relationships with the literature that you enjoy, which of course, paradoxically, demands that you read more so that you know what you like. But once you've discovered what you like at this age and time, you can read less widely, but read more intensely. And I think that maybe that's a good mantra to live by. So, yeah.